Hi everyone, David Aragona and Craig Milkowski are taking a look at the Grade 2 Eclipse Stakes, race 9 on a stakes-laden card Saturday at Woodbine. This one's going the mile and the 16th distance for the older males on the Tapeta surface. And we've got a field of 8 signed on for this race, Craig. Unsurprisingly, Mark Cassie's got 3 runners in this field, and they all, you could argue, are contenders, but he's got a couple of the morning line favorites, particularly the number 7, Get Smoken, who was installed as the 2-1 morning line favorite, despite the fact that he does have a surface question to answer, having never raced on the Tapeta, all of his prior starts coming on the turf.
Yeah, I mean, I can see him being the morning line favorite. He's certainly the horse who's competed at the highest and class levels with success, but that is a pretty big question mark for a new surface. As we've talked about on many of our podcasts, turf and synthetic are not always just interchangeable like some people think.
I think one of the biggest question marks in this race is the number 1, Tyson, who was installed as the 5-2 morning line second choice. There was a time in the middle of last year when he might have been an odds-on favorite in a race like this, but went off form towards the end of the 2023 season. So a bit of a question mark coming back off the layoff here. We'll get into him a little bit more in just a bit. But before we do, let's take a look at the Timeform US pace projector for this Eclipse Stakes. And it does feel like there is some speed in this race here, Craig. And I think one of the most intriguing aspects of this pace projector is the positioning of 2 of those Mark Cassie runners, the number 6 Paramount Prince and the number 7 Get Smoken. Both look like need the lead type, so if they both run in here, you wonder if they might negatively affect each other's chances.
Yeah, it sure seems like that. And if they were the only 2, maybe you would think the plan would be that no, they wouldn't. But these are not just horses who like to be on the front. They're horses that do their best running on the front end, not like they press the pace and do well. So not sure what the plan's going to be, but there is some other speed in here as well. The number 4 War Bomber has shown speed in the past. He's also sprinted a few times. Even JP Hellish, the 5, he's a horse coming out of races with a lot of red fractions where he's up close to the pace, and he's led many times in his career on the synthetic. So I agree with the pace projector. I think things are going to be pretty hot up front if this race stays intact.
And even Tyson can be a bit of a wild card from a pace standpoint. He's a horse that has led from gate to wire in 3 of his 4 victories. It wouldn't be a surprise if the connections want to get more aggressive with him, though you have to wonder if he's quite fast enough to get ahead of confirmed frontrunners like Paramount Prince and Get Smoken. It'll be interesting to see if both of those Mark Cassie runners, number 1, start in this race, but if they both go forward to try to get forward position, because it could potentially set things up for closer. Let's go through this field in post position order, beginning with that horse that's a little difficult to decipher, the number 1, Tyson. You know, Craig, he looked so good through the middle part of last season, winning his first 4 of his first 5 starts before trying some pretty tough company coming back down east to dirt in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, actually taking money in that Grade 1 affair to go off at 5-1 and running respectably to be 3rd behind Bright Future and Proxy. Not quite as successful in the Woodward after that, and I wonder if those attempts against tougher company just messed with him a little bit, because he was a big favorite going back to his preferred surface, the Tapeta at Woodbine last time, and just never really seemed to get into the race. He was sluggish early, wasn't traveling well midway, seemed to have an awkward head carriage through the stretch. He's been off for a long time since then. If he can get back to his better form, he's a major contender in here.
He is for sure. He has the speed figures. It's just a question of what kind of form he's in. I remember when he was in that great form, I tried to beat him on one of these race previews with Carruthers, and Carruthers was no match for him that day. But things kind of went south after that. As you said, his Jockey Club Gold Cup was fine. I regressed after that. Who knows? Maybe it was a tougher competition. Maybe it was switching to dirt and then going back. But he laid off since that poor effort. The one positive that I could find for him to think he's going to run well is he does seem to run well off a layoff. He won as a first-time starter. He laid off after that race. Then he came back over a year later and won again. So maybe he'll be fine coming off of this. It's a long layoff, but he's come off a much longer to win in the past.
It's a good point that he does appear to have a pretty strong and rigorous work tab for this return from the break. The number two is Skyro, and Craig, he's a horse that has had success on the synthetic surface at Gulfstream Park. He's actually finished in the exacta in 4 of 6 starts on the synthetic down in Florida, so he's got that positive experience, and you could make the argument that he's actually run slightly better in some of those synthetic races than he has on the turf, even though he's run well a number of times on the turf. He is making a trainer switch from Brian Lynch, who did have a pretty big winter at Gulfstream. I think you do have to consider that when you're analyzing this horse's form. But moving to Kevin Attard, who has a lot of success at Woodbine, does well off trainer switches like this. And if he gets pace to close into, this horse could be dangerous.
Yeah, I think he's a major player. As I was handicapping this Woodbine card, I've noticed a lot of horses who have run both at Gulfstream and at Woodbine. And for the most part, the form seems to translate. And if it does, I think this horse is going to be very dangerous. That handicap race he came out of, I think it was on one of the big days, maybe Fountain of Youth Day, has turned out to be a pretty strong race. All the horses that have run back out of it have matched or exceeded their speed figures. So I think this horse is a major player if if the pace develops as expected.
Yeah, that March 2nd race, that was a strong field. He was arguably best on January 27th when getting held up in traffic for a long time before unleashing his run. And even last time, that was a really strong field on the turf. The likes of Carl Spackler, Talk of the Nation, Smoken. He's arguably getting some class relief here. So if the pace does set up for him, I think Skyro, a major player. The number 3, Palazzi, is another horse that would appreciate some pace to close into. And he's gotten pace in many of his recent starts, Craig, but I think he's just been in some of the wrong spots recently. He was facing pretty tough company over the winter at Fairgrounds, was never going to be any match for horses like I'm Very Busy and Webslinger, who are two of the best turf horses in the country last time in the Mervyn Muniz Memorial. And then prior to that, his Fairgrounds stakes looks poor, but he got badly sawed off when trying to make a run in the stretch and was basically eased to the wire that day. Before that, he caught yielding turf a couple times. He's kind of proven he doesn't love that sort of surface. He did run pretty well in the valedictory, stretching all the way out to 1.5 miles on the Tapeta at Woodbine, and he has previously won on the Woodbine Tapeta, albeit against slightly weaker company, Craig. Trained by Mark Casse, ridden by one of his go-to riders, Sahin Savachi, who's ridden this horse well in the past. I don't know if he's going to be 20-1, but I can make a case for this horse.
Yeah, he would be the other Cassie in this spot. I can see the case for him. He does need to get a little bit faster. He's never really run up to the race rating in this field. I think it's a 120 for this race. Not sure he's even hit the 115. On turf he has, but on synthetic and a few tries that he's had, he's yet to hit the 115 mark. But I think he's going to run better than what his last few races would indicate for sure.
Yeah, he's run some of those competitive numbers in the past, like you said, on the turf. And I think some of his recent form makes him a little bit dirtied up, but he's going to run better in this spot. The number 4 is War Bomber, and he's a horse who might be negatively affected if the pace really does heat up, though at least he has some versatility, Craig. He's shown the ability to come from off the pace, primarily in shorter one-turn races. He typically likes to race forwardly when going 2 turns. My big concern with War Bomber is that he was in very good form back in 2022. On occasion ran some big figures, but mostly on the turf in 2023. He's now coming off a layoff. His form seemed to tail off a little bit at the end of last season. I just wonder what we're going to get from this horse now that he's a 6-year-old.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And he's also a horse who's had multiple chances to run off a layoff. And not only hasn't he won, he's run pretty terribly in all of them. So I would view this as more of a prep than anything else.
The number 5, JP Hellish, goes out for a very dangerous barn, and we'll take a look at his last race at Gulfstream Park on the turf. And Martin Drexler sent this horse onto the turf course at Gulfstream, which was interesting because he has so much good synthetic form in the past that he actually kept this horse on the Gulfstream turf rather than the Tapeta course at Gulfstream throughout the winter. Just an interesting move that Martin Drexler made with this horse. Has had a lot of success basically everywhere he runs in the past couple of years, especially at Woodbine. So I think just due to the barn, you've got to consider this horse dangerous. He's coming in with very consistent form, Craig, though I think this is a step up in class for him because I didn't necessarily think so much of a few of those optional claiming and allowance fields that he met at Gulfstream. I thought even less of the optional claiming fields that he was facing at Woodbine at the end of last year. So I think he's stepping up in class a little bit, but you do have to respect the good recent form.
Yeah, I think if you bet this horse, you're putting more stock in the barn than you are the horse. Because, like you said, he hasn't really faced this kind of competition. Those races at Gulfstream, looking at the Timeform US race ratings, were a little below this. He only won one of those four races, and that one was at 7.5 furlongs. He'd have to navigate another furlong here. So I just, even though he's 12-1 on the morning line, I think he's going to wind up shorter than that because of the connections, and he's not for me in this spot.
I'll be interested to see how they bet the number 6 Paramount Prince, who achieved his best victory last season when winning the King's Plate, the race formerly known as the Queen's Plate, that first leg of the Canadian Triple Crown. We'll take a look at his most recent start at Gulfstream when he won on March 10th. This was coming off the layoff, so he did get a prep race in for this. Has been off for about 2.5 months since then, but at least he had a race in the interim since racing at Woodbine at the end of last season. And I thought this was a nice return to the races, Craig. He did control this affair up front. There wasn't a whole lot of closing going on from the back. And while he got a nice Timeform US speed figure for this effort, the best of his career so far, I didn't think so much of those racing in behind him. He was clearly just superior to that field. Now he's stepping up in class. I think he's getting a bit of a class test, facing some better older horses for the first time. He makes sense in here, but I do wonder what kind of trip he's going to work out with the presence of his speedy stablemate right to his outside.
Yeah, and obviously that's worth watching if they both go. He's an interesting horse. He actually ran in all three legs of the Canadian Triple Crown, two not so well, the ones on dirt and turf. But getting back to the synthetic, I think we're probably not going to see him on any other surfaces for a while, given how well he does on that one. Ships back up north of Woodbine for this one. He's dangerous, particularly if his stablemate scratches, but I could see him taking even more money than that 4-1 morning line.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if he'd be the favorite in this race. We'll see how that all plays out. His other speedy stablemate, the number 7, Get Smoken, coming off a victory at Kentucky Downs last year. This was all the way back in September of 2023, and he led this marathon race from start to finish, opening up in the early stages and really never letting anybody else get in the mix. This was one of those days at Kentucky Downs, Craig, where it felt like you wanted to have some rail position. The third place finisher, Santine, who just got nipped for second at the wire, was also on the inside throughout. You see eventual runner-up Spooky Channel coming up the inside. So I think Get Smoken was very much with the flow of the way this turf course was playing on this day. Still, though, it was a big step in the right direction. You might remember this horse was entered in the Breeders' Cup Turf last year, was one of those late scratches prior to the Breeders' Cup due to a setback. So he's been off since then, is coming off the layoff at an interesting spot, trying the Tapeta for the first time, a little bit counterintuitive for a horse that has had so much prior success on the turf. I'm not sure what to make of him, Craig, especially given the presence of other speed.
Yeah, for sure. And he's going to get bet. Maybe he won't be the morning, or maybe he won't be the actual favorite when the race goes off, but it's not like he's going to drift up to 5-1. He's going to take some real money. And I think he's a pretty big question mark in here. He's coming off of that long layoff. He's done fine off of layoffs before, but the new surface, that's a big question mark for me at a short price.
I did find a deer formulator stat for trainer Mark Casse with horses like Get Smoken over the past 5 years. First off a 150 to 300 day layoff in Woodbine Stakes races. Mark Casse is just 4 for 39, 10% win rate with a 95-cent ROI, which suggests that these horses do often need a start. Mark Casse is sort of known as a trainer that is a little better second off the layoff as opposed to first off the layoff. So I wonder if this horse is going to be fully cranked, and maybe if this is just a prep race for something a little bit longer down the line. Closing out the field is the number 8, Rondeur. We'll take a look at his most recent start. He's another one of those that did get in a prep race for this in mid-May at Woodbine, winning this optional claim race, going 7 furlongs. A nice return for this horse, Craig, beginning his 5-year-old season. You might remember all the way back in 2022, he was actually the favorite in that Queen's Plate that was won so impressively by the filly Moira. Hasn't really gotten back to his best form since then, but this return from the layoff was a step in the right direction. He's just going to have to get faster now, stretching out again.
He is. But I think there's some promise here. I like that he had a prep race. He looked like a much better horse than he did in his 4-year-old races. He had a brief campaign that year, so I assume something was up with him. He's also a horse who this pace should fit a little bit, given that he's got a decent outside post position. It's not a big field, so I could see him making a nice late run. He will have to get faster, but if he can get back to some of those figures he ran as a 3-year-old with natural maturity and improvement, he could be right there with this group.
Well, Craig, let's throw up our picks for this race, and we're going in slightly different directions here. Not surprising. This is a pretty tough race to handicap. I respect the horse that you have on top, the number 2, Skyro. I put him third. Kind of suspected you'd like this horse. I know you've had an affinity for him in the past, but it does seem like his running style fits this race really well, and we know he handles the synthetic.
Yeah, he handled it at Gulfstream just fine. And I think those races were actually really strong and stronger than what we see here. And I know his turf races were tougher than what we see here. So I think he's taken a drop in class. I think he should get the right pace set up. And I just happen to think he's the best horse and he's going to offer some value.
Yeah, I'm skeptical of both of those Mark Cassie speed horses, the 6 Paramount Prince and the number 7 Get Smoken. Actually, neither of us have them anywhere in our picks for this race. I actually think the number 1 Tyson is the horse to beat. If he shows up, I think he's going to be really tough, although he's a bit of a wild card. I put the number 3 Palazzi on top. I don't think he's going to be the 20-1 that he is in the morning line, but I think anything in double-digit odds is certainly going to be value on a horse that does have the running style to fit the projected pace scenario pretty well. And he's run some speed figures to put him in the mix. I can make excuses for many of his recent starts, and I think Palazzi is going to run better in this Grade 2 Eclipse Stakes. So he's my pick in here. Craig going for the number 2 Skyro at race 9 at Woodbine on Saturday, the Grade 2 Eclipse. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.